Hello, I'm Jishan Karbanda.
And I'm Ron Batu. Welcome to our podcast, Weekly Dose of High School, where we'll be guiding you through the life of a high school student while speaking to knowledgeable people in the industry.
Welcome to our 14th episode. Today we are here with Ben Cooper, who has practiced law in both Australia and England. He has spent more than 5 years running the pre-law program at Baylor University, where he taught classes on the legal profession. Additionally, Ben has founded a firm specializing in law school admissions and career consulting called PreLawPro. So, in today's episode, Ben will be speaking with us about the topic of exploring majors and career options, and also a little bit about undergraduate admissions. And he'll also be advising us on the best possible way to make the most of our college experience.
Before we get started, would you like to add anything else, Mr. Cooper, that we haven't already spoken about?
No, that sounds great. I'm excited to get on with the interview.
Sounds great. Without further ado, let's get into today's episode.
So, Ben, as a college and career consultant, what are like the two biggest takeaways that you've seen, or the two biggest issues that you've seen come up in throughout your years? And would you mind in sharing this with our audience?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think there's probably more than one or two. I think the first thing that springs to mind is you don't have to have it all figured out on day one. I think a lot of students put themselves under a lot of pressure to have this very clear, well laid out plan on how the rest of their life is going to pan out.
Hmm.
And the reality is, you can go into college with a lot of unknown questions and come out the other end perfectly fine. And your plans, no matter how well laid they are, they will change. I think the other thing that I see a lot of is fear of failure that paralyzes a lot of people, and prevents them from taking advantage of opportunities that scare them, but that could ultimately lead them to a really exciting outcome. And I think there's probably a few reasons for that. But one of the things I really encounter a lot in my own practice is just helping people see that just because something might be uncomfortable doesn't mean it's a bad thing.
Mhm.
Thank
Got
you,
it.
Ben.
Well said.
So, Ben, do you think it's too late for someone to switch what they want to major in by their senior year? Let's say the student wanted to switch from majoring in CS to medicine or from CS to engineering.
Yeah, I mean, senior year is pretty late. There's no doubt about that. But it doesn't mean it's necessarily too late. And it will depend from what the situation is from one college to another, and how many of their classes are going to be transferable. But it might mean, for example, that because they're doing it in senior year, that they actually might need to be in college for an extra year. And if you know that you're switching to a major that you really are settled on and you really do need in order to pursue your career, this comes back to this fear that we just mentioned. I think a lot of people think, oh, gosh, I've failed if I'm in college for 5 years. And yes, it will cost you more money, but no one is going to ask you in the workforce, how long were you in college for? No one's going to look at you and say, oh, you were in college for 5 years. I'm not interested in hiring you. So if it's one more year and it gets you to where you need to be, then there's nothing wrong with taking that extra year and getting the major you need to go where you need to go.
Just a quick follow-up question. Wouldn't it be hard for the student to get into their desired college because they haven't done as many extracurricular programs specifying in the field that they want to switch to?
Could you just broke up there? Sorry.
Oh, sorry, sorry.
Could you repeat that question?
So don't you think it'll be hard for a student to get into their new desired college? Like, let's say the student want to go from CS to medicine. So the student wants to major in probably Johns Hopkins or Brown. So wouldn't it be hard for that student to get into that school if they haven't done as many extracurriculars focusing on medicine? Because they're in
Yeah.
their senior year by now, so that'd be
Yeah,
hard.
so that's a really good question, and I think I'll answer this in a more general sense, because I'm not a med school admissions expert. But what I'll say is this: when you look at graduate programs across the board, whether that's business school, law school, medical school, they love people who have experience, and it's not uncommon for someone who maybe lacks some of that real world experience to graduate from college to get some relevant work experience, whether that's in a law firm or as a medical scribe or in the industry that they're hoping to enter. And it helps mature them. It helps demonstrate a very real interest in that area rather than it just being the next thing that they move on to. So if you don't have that resume built up and you are hoping to go onto a graduate program, there is a very straightforward way to get that, and that's just to go and work for a year or two.
Thank you, Ben.
Okay, Ben. So I know you specialize in like law firm admissions. So, and you may have heard like how competitive computer science is for undergraduate admissions. And do you think there's like any other majors out there that are equally as impacted and competitive? So like one such major that comes to mind for me is business. So do you agree with this, or do you think there's any other ones that are as equally impacted as CS?
Yeah, that's a really tough question, but it's a good one to ask. So I think it's all going to be relative in the sense that it's always going to be competitive to get into Harvard Business School, and it's
Mhm.
always going to be tough to get into, a really competitive medical school, whether it's 2015 or 2025. But that's not always going to be the case at all schools, and there's going to be quite a few, economic factors that play into that. So historically, you'll see graduate school admissions get a lot more competitive in a time of, say, of a economic recession. So I think some programs at some schools are always just going to be competitive. But I think what you'll find is, and this is something universities are struggling with right now, is a lot of your generation is really counting the cost of higher education. And they're trying to decide, is this really a good way to spend my time and money, especially with student debt and graduate school tuition, but just college tuition being, higher than it's ever been before. So I think computer science is an example of a major where I think there's a pretty significant demand for people. We don't have enough people with that skill set. And so I think, it's going to be a reasonably solid career path to go down. But in terms of its competitive nature, I think it's going to vary from one school to another. One of the things that a lot of universities are struggling with now is, for a very long time, people just had kids, and then those kids would get to college age and they would go to college. But what we're seeing now is we've seen a decline in our birth rate. And so there's actually a lot fewer students to fill seats in colleges. And so I think in the years ahead, we're going to see some interesting changes in how many universities there are and perhaps the cost of tuition, but I also think how competitive it is to get into those programs that aren't at the very top of the list.
Mhm. Thank you.
So Ben, do you think there's a method to write well-written essays that all colleges, including Ivy Leagues, would love to read? Since most of our audience are rising seniors and will be submitting their essays soon, do you have any advice to give to them?
Yeah, it sounds really simple, but the first thing is read the prompt carefully. Uh, it is so important that you actually address the questions that are actually being asked to an essay prompt. It's so easy to end up writing this amazing essay that doesn't actually address the prompt. It's also very important to very carefully proofread your essays. It happens every year where someone will submit their essay to the University of Michigan and they'll refer to Michigan State, or they'll submit their UCLA essay to Berkeley. So read the prompt, carefully proofread it. And I'm a big fan of actually printing out a hard copy and getting a chance to see it in physical copy, but also getting someone else to read it to catch those little things that you sometimes miss because you're just so close to the essay itself. And then the other thing I would just say is, I think in high school, there is a propensity to reward the use of large words and very long verbose paragraphs and sentences. And I had an old professor who used to tell me that you need to be able to explain a $20 idea using $5 words, not the other way around. So when you're looking at your writing and you're reading back your essay aloud and you're listening to what you've written, ask yourself, am I trying to sound more sophisticated than I need to be? Is my paragraph broken up into sentences, or is it just one really long sentence, which you actually see quite a bit? So they're the things that I would say, you really want to focus on. And then, in addressing the prompt, when they're asking you for a personal statement, don't try and rely on quotes or tropes. You really want to make sure that you're making an essay about yourself, because in a lot of cases, that's the only way that schools are going to get to know you.
Thank you very much, Ben. That's actually really useful. Thank you so much.
So I guess follow up to that, Ben, you mentioned like in the Michigan example, like when you're applying to Michigan, like don't mention Michigan State. So yeah. So do you recommend like reusing like certain essays or like recycling certain essays from college to college?
So again, it just comes back to making sure that you're addressing the specific prompts. Now, in the context of law school, a lot of the personal statements are going to have a very generalized prompt, but that isn't always the case. And so, it's always just, whether it's law school or undergraduate, just always make sure that you actually are addressing the question you're being asked to write about.
Got it. Okay, now moving on. So there are like hundreds and thousands of other college consultants out there. And so like, what do you think a student should look for when they're trying to select the best college consultant for them?
Yeah. So again, I'll focus on my little sector of the world, which is the law school piece, and hopefully some of that advice can carry over to maybe students who are looking to hire someone for help when it comes to the undergraduate piece. In my little world, I encourage students to look for people who have a couple of things on their resume. So the first thing is, have they gone to law school? And then, have they spent more time as a lawyer than they did in law school? And what you'll find, a surprising amount actually, is that a lot of consultants haven't gone to law school, or if they went to law school, they spent more time as a law student than as a lawyer. And if you're going to be a surgeon, for example, it's probably very unlikely you're going to go to an accountant and say, can you tell me what it's like to be an accountant? And can you tell me what it's like to be a surgeon? And can you help me become one? And so, when you're looking for a consultant, look for people who have, I think, experience, that have a proven record. And when it comes to specialized consulting, whether that's medical school or law school, look for people who've actually been to school in that area and who actually have an experience professionally in that area, because you're not only wanting to get advice on how to get into those programs and how to do well, but you also want to get an insight into what that career is actually like and how to make the most of that profession once you get into it.
Thank you.
So Ben, there might be students in our audience who probably want to major in law. So can you explain why PreLawPro would be a great choice for a law student to enroll in?
Yeah, you set that question up very nicely. Look, I think the big focus here at PreLawPro is not necessarily just to mass produce as many lawyers as possible. For your listeners who are in high school and shortly about to go into college, it's about helping them understand what it is lawyers actually do, and then helping them figure out whether or not that's really what they actually want to do. And you can actually go to the show notes of this episode, and you guys have been kind enough to include a link to a career planning tool that your listeners can just follow that link, and you can download that career planning tool and you can start to explore some of this stuff yourself. But I think the big focus is, I've actually gone to law school. I've actually spent more time as an actual lawyer than I did as a law student. And I hope to use that experience to help, my clients at the high school and freshman, sophomore level to actually be able to answer those two questions. What is it like? And is that something that you actually want to do? And the good thing is too, law is a great pathway to a number of different careers. People leverage their law degrees into the intelligence and national security space. finance and banking. It's a great background for those who might be interested in entrepreneurship. But if you do go to law school, there's a very good chance you're going to have to be a lawyer for a little while. And so, it's a lot of work, time, money, and effort. And so you want to make sure that if you do go down that road, you know why you're going and what you want to get out of it at the end.
Thank you, Ben.
All right, Ben. So, do you think like students, specifically high school students, who don't get into like a elite university or the school of their dreams, like mainly the top 20 universities in the nation, do you think they are ready for success compared to like a student who gets into an elite university? Now, obviously, this comes to without saying the fact that if a student who's motivated and doesn't go to an elite university will obviously succeed in life. But what if, like, do you think a student who goes to a elite university, will they have better opportunities to succeed in life compared to like a student who doesn't go to such university?
Yeah, that's a question that I think a lot of your peers are wrestling with. And I think the answer is the prestige of a university, I think, is very often overrated. And I think a lot of it sometimes is, I want to be careful how I word this. I think a lot of parents, are very proud of their children, and they derive a lot of satisfaction from seeing their students go to a prestigious university. But I also think from the student's perspective, uh, it isn't always in your best interest to go to the brightest and shiniest and most prestigious school. There's a few reasons for that. The first one is financial. It costs a lot of money to go to an Ivy League school, and that often means for a lot of people a very high debt level when they graduate. And I think that, if you're really conscious of price, you can often get just as good an outcome, if not better, at a university where you're paying a lot less. You also want to go to a university where you're a good fit academically. So, if you got into, prestigious university, but you're not getting any money and you were admitted, you probably got some offers elsewhere, and you got to look at where you've been performing as a student. And it's much better for you to be able to graduate from a school and say, I have a strong GPA, I finished in a good percentage of my class, than to have been at another university that maybe sounds really prestigious, but where you've graduated with a significant level of debt and you perhaps haven't performed to that same standard. Because universities are increasingly being put under pressure to make sure that you students get a good return on an investment in the sense of getting a good job when you graduate. And so, factor in a bunch of different considerations, but I certainly don't think it's as simple as just go wherever is the most highly ranked school, because I think you can really have a great outcome at a school that, quote unquote, is not as prestigious, but might be a better fit for you personally, where you might do better academically. There might be a better ratio of professors to students. They might have, a better setting, whether that's a rural school or a school in a metropolitan center. There's just so many other things that need to go into choosing a school above and beyond, its perceived prestige. And from an undergraduate side of things, when you do move on to graduate programs, they're going to be a lot more focused on test scores, GPAs, what your professors have to say about you, the kind of resume that you've built. They're the things that are going to open the doors to the next chapter of your professional life, not having merely just gone to, prestigious university.
Well, very well said. But Ben, so like why do you think a lot of students across America want to go to a prestigious school just because of the name? Is there like is there a sense of bragging rights, or like what is it exactly that makes them want to go to the prestigious school no matter what the opportunity cost could be?
Well, I think there is a perception that if I go to, and I'm not going to name a particular school, but if I go to fancy university, that it's going to open up a bunch of job opportunities and create some alumni relationships and networks that are going to carry on into my professional life. And to some extent, to some extent that is true, but the question is, to the extent that that is true, does it justify the additional expense? And that's a genuine question that isn't always easy to answer. And so I think part of it is there's a nice feeling about saying, I went to such and such a school. I think there is a perception that it will open up a bunch of career paths and alumni networks that you wouldn't get elsewhere. And I think to some extent that's true, right? But I also think you can still have a really great start to life professionally by going to a school where you're a better fit personally, academically, and where you have better access to your professors and where you're able to actually excel. Because I still think the benefit of doing well in college is greater than the benefit of just having graduated from a university that's perceived as being prestigious. And that's to say nothing of the debt load. Okay,
Mhm.
so there's all of these benefits that you might get from a particular scenario, but you have to ask yourself, does this benefit that I obtain outweigh some of the negatives? And in a lot of contexts, I certainly know I would rather have graduated with a lot less debt and not have to pay that off for years and years and years than to have had the benefit of saying I went to, prestigious university.
Mhm. Well, this might be like a controversial like thing of saying it, but like in terms of the debt, right? So, like if you go to a prestigious university, isn't it like considered you're like likely to get a good paying job afterwards? So you're more like you'll be able to pay off your debt within a couple of years.
Where it's very dependent on several factors. One is, what major? If you're an engineering major or a computer science major, you're going to be earning, a very different amount to someone who's maybe done, I don't know, an arts history major.
Mhm.
I'm not picking on art history. I'm just picking that as an example. So it varies wildly from one major to another. And, I think a lot of students really overestimate their starting salary coming out of college. I don't know the exact figure, but the average American earns somewhere between, I think, $55,000 and $60,000.
Mhm.
And a lot of college graduates assume that they're going to be pulling in six figures right out of college. And in a lot of cases, it's just not the case. And so, this is where you have to have a reasonable expectation of what those starting salaries are going to be in order to assess, is this really going to be worthwhile? And you also have to remember that if you go in to one career path, those assumptions will change if you change majors. So if you go in as an engineering student, you're going to have a certain set of parameters. But then if you decide, you know what, I'm not interested in this, I want to go and do political science, then your salary and job opportunities and outcomes are going to change as well. And so you need to change how you view the debt as well.
Mhm. Got it. Thank you.
I think the big thing is, be aware of what college is going to cost you. That's not to say don't go at all. It's, I still think college is a great investment, but you don't need a Ferrari to go and pick up your groceries.
Right.
So make sure that it's fit for purpose, make sure that it fits your budget, and, it's an investment of your time and effort and money. And you want to make sure that you're getting the best return on that investment. And that might mean that based on your particular career path and your particular circumstance, that might mean that you go to, what's a more prestigious university. But it might also mean that you have just as good an outcome and you're still on the path to where you want to end up if you go to, somewhere state.
Mhm. Thank you. I actually like that analogy or metaphor that you used about the Ferrari. All right.
Who doesn't like a Ferrari though, right?
Right.
That's
Right.
very true. Thank you so much, Ben. So, well, if you haven't already, please check PreLawPro, the PreLawPro link in the description below, where it's a really good career planning tool organized by Ben Cooper. So if you haven't already, please check it out. It's in the description. Well, that's it for today for episode 14 of Weekly Dose of High School. Hope you guys enjoyed Ben speak about career options and the best possible way to make out the college experience.
Also, if you're not already, make sure to subscribe to our podcast, whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, or on YouTube. We're on all those platforms and we upload weekly episodes. So make sure you subscribe so you never miss an upload. And like Baran just mentioned, make sure to check out Ben's PreLawPro career planning too. Until then, take it easy, guys.